have a good number coming in now. So we're nearly ready to start the webinar on Beyond Pricing. So what I'm going to do is, before I hand over, the reason we're doing this webinar on dynamic pricing, what it is, how does it work, how much does it cost, is because we get lots and lots and lots of questions about what it is. And to be brutally honest with you, we can't answer them because we're not the experts. So we thought we'd get the team leader, Jacob Gingrich from Beyond Pricing, to come and tell us all about it and answer your questions. Robert Kennedy from Super Control will also be on at the end to answer your questions. And we're just going to give a short preamble. What's the view on it? Well, I would say 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're absolutely everywhere to go. Technology will be the king of this. It'll be better at it than we are. Now, how you get from where we are today to that point is the purpose of today's webinar. How do we make that journey of beginning to trust our pricing to a computer? Absolutely terrifying for most of us, but lots of people are doing it. Lots of people in self-catering are doing it, and people like the airlines and hotels and many other hospitality industries have been doing this for a very, very long time. So we're kind of playing catch up on this. So this is not new technology. It's new technology to the self-catering sector, particularly in the UK. So the purpose of today is for you guys to ask as many questions as you like on Jacob has to say, because he's going to try and start off by myth busting. That's right, isn't it, Jacob? You're going to bust some myths on what this is. So I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, just to say we're very grateful to have you all the way from America on this call. And I'm now going to hand over to Beth Bailey from Premier Cottages. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm just trying to get up me slides. We're obviously doing this in, now I've lost my slides. We're doing this in conjunction Premier Cottages and PASC. So for those of you who are not familiar with Premier Cottages, I thought it was just worth doing a very brief run through. So what we're not is we're not an agency, we are not an OTA. We were set up about 25 years ago by a bunch of self-catering professionals when the industry started to consolidate, who had no intention of paying 25% plus VAT to an agency who wasn't even going to do the cleaning. So it's a book direct model. It's a marketing cooperative for high-end self-catering. The idea is that we keep control of our own business models, our pricing, our T's and C's. And I say we because it's run by the members. The board are all members. They're all owners themselves for the members. So the interests of the board are completely aligned with those of the members. There's no fancy offices, and we're not paying any dividends. We spend all the money on marketing. The idea of Premier Cottages was also to have, for want of a better term, an educational remit. So to help members generate their own direct bookings by introducing them to new technologies, etc., which is one of the things we're doing today. And we work very closely with PASC. I'm on the board of PASC, Alistair's on the board of Premier Cottages, and we jointly keep members up to date on market changes, legislation, new technologies, etc. What do we do? We're relatively small in terms of number of cottages, so we market fewer than 1,000 cottages, but we've always been kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of the technology side. So we were very early to social media, for example. We have a large and very engaged Facebook following of 120,000. We have a very significant database of past guests that's all GDPR compliant and regularly cleaned. And that is kind of brand, people who are familiar with the Premier Cottages brand and who are prepared to pay the premium for the premium price. We were the first to market with a mobile website, the first with SSL. I think we're the only operator in the sector which has 3 full foreign language websites, German, French and Dutch. And we were absolutely, almost certainly the only operator in the market that when we saw lockdown coming, we halved annual membership fees because that was the time we were due to renew, so that we could bring as many members through to the end of the crisis, still able to be in control of their own businesses. All properties are 4 or 5 star graded. USP for Premier Cottages is quality, and you pay a flat fee dependent on your number of sleepers. Just to give the power of something of what small organizations can do. So we have, as I say, 120,000 Facebook likes, but we only have 873 cottages. So that's 140 odd likes per cottage. Holiday lettings have nearly twice as many followers as we do, but they've got 600,000 cottages. So it doesn't take a mathematical genius to work out where you're likely to get the most exposure. And if you look at the engagement, we typically get very high engagement. We do lots and lots of other things, not just Facebook, but it was just worth pointing that out. And if you're interested in finding out more, then please visit our website. There is a button, a join button on the website, and you can go and find some more information and apply if you are interested. Pricing is one of the toughest jobs we all do. It's definitely an art, not a science. Dynamic pricing models are trying to obviously introduce more science into it, but I think every year we all sit there scratching our heads, looking over the fence at what the neighbour's doing, adding 2.5% rate of inflation. We kind of do it intuitively, and we don't always get it right. If you price too high, obviously we're all scared that we're going to be empty. If you price too low, you may be booked out for the next 2.5 years, but you're working in what sits off for not very much margin. And that's where the dynamic pricing model can come in, because it really is a tool for optimizing your revenue. So I'm not going to burble on anymore, but I would like to welcome Jake, and he can tell us how the magic happens.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for the intro, Beth, and thanks everybody from PASC who joined the webinar today. I'm excited to show you some information on dynamic pricing. As Alistar said, I'd like to start with kind of busting some myths about dynamic pricing. So quick agenda, we'll walk a quick intro about Beyond Pricing, just really fast, who we are, who we work with. What is dynamic pricing? What are some examples of that? How does it work? And also what it isn't. There's a lot of kind of preconceived notions of dynamic pricing. It's used in other industries, and dynamic pricing for self-caterers has its own flavor. It has its own strategy, and it works a little bit different. Another big change for people that I wanted to talk through really quickly is daily rates versus length of stay rates. We're going to break down really quickly the differences in the strategies, what rules and settings you might want to change when making a switch, and then what really kind of matters between the two. Finishing up, and really the bulk of the call is we're gonna spend some time in the Beyond Pricing dashboard. Robert Kennedy on the panel today. He's a longtime user of Beyond Pricing. We'll be showing you his account. And really, I like to break the product up into 3 different parts, right? There's the algo. That's what's automatically setting your rates with data. That's the thing I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions on, and we need to earn your trust to let a computer set those rates for you. And the other section would be the overrides that we provide. So users of our tool, at the end of the day, right, they're in control of their pricing, and there's a ton of settings to keep guardrails up and make adjustments for your own strategy. And we'll finish up with our stats and insights, which tell you how properties in the portfolio is performing, so you know what overrides you might want to make. We'll finish up with the Q&A. There's a question and answer. I can see some questions coming in. So Robert, Beth, Alistar, if you see any questions coming in that you think are interesting, that'll kind of add to the conversation, let me know, and I can put a pause and answer those questions. So Beyond Pricing, who are we? So we built the world's first dynamic pricing engine for short-term rentals. We started back in 2013, and one of our co-founders, Ian McHenry, used to write pricing algorithms for really large airlines like Aeromexico, hotel chains like Intercontinental Hotels. And we brought that same sophistication and that same model of pricing to the short-term rental industry. Operators in those industries, they all use revenue management software, which is what Beyond Pricing is. They all use software and data to power those pricing strategies. None of them are, setting rates by hand or manually adjusting rates every day. They're all using some algorithm-based software, and that's what we're providing to our industry. So we started in 2013. We built our partnership with Super Control in 2019. As of today, we're live all across the UK. So the data sets that we use that we'll dig into in a minute, all of those are hand built by revenue management. And our team has taken the time to launch all of the UK, Ireland, and really most of Europe. So if you're on the call today, we'll be able to help you price your homes. We have the data for you today. We're a team of about 70 people across the globe. Like I said, we started in San Francisco, but we've got offices in London, Lisbon, Barcelona, and Australia. And being a true global company, we really can offer 24/7 support with people located all across the globe in different languages. And our customers range from individual homeowners that have one property that's a small business up to some of the largest property managers in the world with 2,000 listings and $30 million in turnover. And virtually all of our customers and partners see somewhere between 10 and 40% more in booking revenue. The reason we provide ROI, a big part of that is we're always helping you win at the margins. We help you never leave money on the table, whether that's 5% by slightly increasing rates or really looking at high season or some of these big events and achieving ADRs that are a lot higher than you would have priced it in the past. But our main goal is to help you succeed, and I think that's one thing Beth mentioned. Was it's sometimes it's hard to just be confident in your prices. You may want to increase prices. You know that you might be able to capture a little bit more, but you're not sure how much. So we want to help you maximize revenue for your portfolio, all of that work you're putting into your business, but also help you feel confident that you're doing that. So that's our main goal when we're working with our partners. So what is dynamic pricing? Oxford Dictionary says it's the practice of varying price for a product or service to reflect changing market conditions, in particular the charging of a higher price at a time of higher demand. So everyone pretty much already does it. Everyone has their peak holiday rate, they've got their mid-season rate, and they've got their low season rate. Maybe more seasons, you may have 10, 20, 30 different seasons set up. But in general, right, everyone's already basing their prices off of demand. And by doing that, we all see ROI from that, right? When we're charging more for half term, Christmas and New Year's, Easter, our high season, right? We're capturing more revenue because we're charging higher than we could have if we only charged a flat rate. And in our low season, right, January and February and March, that may not be our most favorite time to get bookings, but it's important to price our properties a little bit lower so we get slightly higher occupancy and kind of optimize revenue that way. The challenge pretty much in every vacation rental market, right, is we want to align supply and demand, right? That's how equilibrium's met. It's how all economies and businesses are able to maximize their revenue. So when we think about having 5 seasons, 10 seasons, even 20 seasons, when we look at occupancy, that's what this chart is showing us here. It's showing us 2 lines for a neighborhood in Cornwall. The pink line is 2 years ago. So that would be 2019. And the teal line is the last 12 months. So the past year of occupancy. So you can see, right, there's tons of fluctuations throughout the year for different events. Christmas, half term, Easter, early May bank holiday, spring bank holiday, your August high season, other festivals. And really the point is that there are a ton of different seasons, right? There's 365 different seasons. And just like setting up your high season rate, taking the time to capture some of these higher rates for higher demand for these weekends or events and holidays, right? It's the same, that same science and same reason that you have the opportunity to charge higher for all of these different days. And capturing all of that is really difficult. Some examples of dynamic pricing, right? We were looking at different seasons. You can raise your rates for different events and holidays, like half term, graduations, depending on what market you're in. Weekend weekdays, some markets have really strong weekend weekday fluctuations where you should be charging 70% of your weekly rate on the weekend, or maybe even more. Some may not have that high of a weekend weekday fluctuation. Two other examples of dynamic pricing would be last minute discounts. So if you're looking at your calendar and there's a week open on the calendar, and we're like 4 weeks away, there's not much time to get that booked, right? Reducing the price a little bit and applying a discount to make sure it's filled, that's a aspect of dynamic pricing. Or increasing your rates farther out. We know from data that people who book like a year or more in advance, they're not too price sensitive. They're looking for that perfect property for their perfect trip, and usually they're ready to pay top dollar for that. So these are all examples of dynamic pricing, and may be what you had in mind for what we'd be talking about today. And here are some myths that dynamic pricing isn't, that I wanted to get ahead of and talk about today. One is, when you move to dynamic pricing, it doesn't all of a sudden mean that now you are going to run like a hotel and you should be accepting one-night bookings. In fact, most of our clients don't accept one-night bookings. Most of the time don't accept two-night bookings. Majority of our clients are in traditional vacation rental markets, usually requiring 3 nights in low season, 5 nights in high season. So even though this dynamic pricing kind of comes from that hotel industry and background, right, we don't need to turn ourselves into that type of operation in order to see the benefits of dynamic pricing. Two is we're not copying off of competitors or market pricing when setting your rates. A lot of folks aren't that great at pricing their own vacation home, so we don't want to copy off of what we call as a failing student. If they're getting a C or D on the test and we copy off of them, we're going to get a C or D as well. And we don't follow market averages, right? If there starts to be a race to the bottom in your market, or you just notice competition is lowering their rates, we're not going to automatically lower our rates because of that. A third aspect of dynamic pricing that people get mixed up on is we're not trying to get 100% occupancy. We do want to put ourselves in position to get booked every day, if possible, but we're not trying to drop rates to the floor and optimize for occupancy and make that the most important thing. What we're trying to maximize is your total revenue minus costs and your profit. So we want to see your revenue increase, but your costs relatively stay the same, so that you see that added profit to the business. And the fourth is that it's not, we don't require channel parity. So you can still charge 15% more on Airbnb, 20% more on booking.com, whatever those markups are on your channels, those still behave and work the same way that happens today. The second section we're going to talk about are daily rates versus length of stay strategy. So daily rates overview. Each day has a standalone rate. This is a screenshot of our tool looking at April 2021. So just wanted us to focus on kind of 1 month here. And you can see how each day has a different rate tied to it. The city of York is a big weekend weekday market. So you can see lower rates here during the week with these lighter blue squares. And you can see those higher price days on the weekends. So when guests go to book, right, let's say someone wanted to stay from the 11th through the 17th, they would just be shown whether they're going to book on your website or Airbnb, the total of 874 pounds, and they'll be paying a nightly price of 124 pounds. So when you do switch to dynamic rates, everyday costs different, but when guests go to book, they're not shown 7 different prices. They're always kind of shown that average, so there isn't a huge change in that guest experience. One big difference between using daily rates and lengths of stay is how you manage your profitability. So when people use daily rates, they're not setting up specific rates for different lengths of stay, like you might be used to. So they always are setting up minimum lengths of stay that may be a little bit more strict than you might see in a length of stay pricing model. So in this example, it's that same month of April. let's say the agency or this is your account, and you don't want to go below 300 pounds in order to get a booking. That's kind of where, after your costs, that's the minimum amount of return that you'd want off of one booking or off of one cleaning. So in this month, we might recommend requiring a 3-night stay, so that we know that the lowest prices we're really going to are about 100 pounds. So any 3 days that someone books during this month is going to surpass that 300 pound mark. So that's just a little bit about daily rates and how profitability is managed. Length of stay pricing, right, which I'm sure you guys are even a lot more familiar with than I am. But you're setting a weekly rate, and then each stay below that is some percentage of the weekly rate, right, or in relation to that weekly rate in some way. And when you're creating rates specific to these rules, it can be really hard to capture some of that demand fluctuations that you're seeing throughout the year. We too agree that, you know, a 2 or 3 night stay on the weekend should be a pretty high percentage of the weekly rate, especially if it's a popular weekend. But what we can see in Cornwall, and this is data from 2 years ago, I saw some questions in the Q&A about data looking funky. So this is 2 years ago, right? Our past year occupancy looks different here when we had all those lockdowns. But you know, when looking at this chart, you can see how every weekend is a little bit different. Every week's a little bit different. So while in general we agree that a weekly weekend rate should be a high percentage, you know, they definitely all shouldn't be the same. And that percentage sometimes may be pricing you out of a short break, and sometimes it might be leaving a little bit of money on the table. And that's kind of one of the big differences is, like, dynamic pricing makes it a lot easier to visualize and also set these rates according to demand. But length of stay pricing does have some flexibility on those length of stay rules. So if we think about that last scenario we had and with daily pricing, where, you know, hey, anything less than 3 nights isn't really a profitable booking. So if you're using daily rates, you just set that 3-night stay, and then if a 2-night gap shows up, you know, you kind of handle that after the fact. Where length of stay pricing, since you're setting up a 1-night price and a 2-night price, et cetera, right, you're able to take a profitable booking at all these different lengths of stay. So the biggest concern I think when people have when moving from length of stay to dynamic pricing is with their short breaks, right? Because they're starting to have to think about how to manage profitability and what do they really want to offer these shorter breaks for, which can be confusing and a little frustrating because you feel like you're losing out on a little flexibility. And you are, right? With our tool, you can't offer these 1, 2, 3-night stays at this certain percentage. But when we look at total revenue, those stays typically make up such a small portion of revenue. And you can always handle those gaps after the fact. So those are the 2 biggest differences that we see and the challenges when people are making that change. You know, you may want to rethink minimum stay rules if you're using length of stay pricing. And there can definitely be a learning curve, but what we hear from all of our users is after a few weeks, they get really comfortable with the tool. They learn how to use our minimum price and the rules in Super Control to make sure they're taking the right bookings. And it's not really about daily rates versus length of stay. The most important thing is that we're having rates that are tied to demand, and we're looking at that data to educate our pricing strategy. So when we're looking at that neighborhood in Cornwall, now we're looking at 3 different lines. And I wanted to focus on the pink line, which is 2 years ago. That's kind of business as normal, as we might want to hope to call it. And the teal line, right, that's the occupancy for this past year. So we can see how that line was pretty close to our performance 2 years ago until we get to March. Basically from March to July, we have a ton of blocks, right? And a bunch of data that we're not using to set prices because it's not, essentially everyone in the market is blocking their properties. But here on July 4th, right, when we can see when self-creating was allowed again, that's when we get back to our normal data. And we can see this occupancy levels in the 80% and 90% in this neighborhood in Cornwall, when last year we were hovering around 60%, 75%. occupancy. And this is a story that we're seeing across the UK, is that really since July, we've seen occupancy a lot higher than last year. So really the story of, hey, did I have optimized rates from July to November this year? Isn't how you're kind of managing these shorter breaks and how you're filling these gaps. It's, hey, were you charging a lot higher rates than last year since July? Because you did have the opportunity to, most likely, in your market. And that's really the most important thing, is we're having those weekly rates, and our rates in general are focused on demand. So we know how much more we can charge versus last year, or if we should be getting aggressive with our rates or bringing them down. So it always kind of pays to be in the know about the data, whether you're using daily rates or length of stay or any other tools. So the third section of today is the Beyond Pricing overview. Today, the overview is really going to be focused on the super control use case. So we do have integrations with other PMS systems. We do have the ability to integrate with Airbnb, Booking.com, and VRBO directly. And super control being a PMS, right? How we work with them is similar to other systems. Beyond Pricing, we're your central pricing engine. Every night, we're going out into the market. We're looking at market data. We're calculating 365 daily rates for every unit. And then we're pushing those rates into super control every single day, right? So you'll never have to copy over rates from last year again, or go and research when the bank holidays are, what day of the week is Easter falling on, or what week of April is Easter, right? All these events and holidays can change dates. And we're taking that manual process off of your plate so that you always have a year of optimized pricing. So that feeds out into the super control, and then super control then applies markups, any type of booking fees or extras, and also your min stay rules. They take care of packaging up those rates and then sending them to your website and all the other channels that you post to today, so you can get booked at those rates. So what is controlling your rates? So what's happening automatically? What kind of are you responsible for to be doing? Wanted to make clear that there's only 3 things that are adjusting your rates. One is your settings. So the base price, min price, or your last minute discounts, right? These are settings that you're responsible for, and you will set up each listing individually, and we can help you do that. Then there's occupancy data. So we're going to walk through exactly in the tool what that occupancy data looks like, where it comes from, but it's market data. So our algorithm, all it's taking is your base price and how the market is booking up at large, and we're using that to set 365 rates. So we do have the ability to push out pricing farther than a year. All you have to do is reach out to our support team and make a request. We have to have a default setting in the tool, so we set that to 1 year. So if you do need pricing set out farther than 1 year, especially if you're working in markets where people are booking weddings farther than a year in advance, graduations, rebookings from existing guests, right, we can push that pricing out further. And really the main point here is we're not using competitors' rates or market averages to come up with pricing suggestions. So if you have a luxury unit, a unique unit, we're not going to discount you because of how your property kind of relates to others. Nor are your historical rates used. So when you do connect to Beyond Pricing, if you create an account with us, one thing you'll be able to do is compare your rates versus our rates on a pricing chart. Now, we don't use your historical rates. So if you see our rates kind of lining up with yours, it's not because we're copying off of you. It's because hey, we're using data to set these rates, and you've probably been in your market for a long time. So our prices probably shouldn't be wildly different in terms of seasonality. Maybe just a few big events are priced differently, or seasons may be priced a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So everything's based on market data and the base price that you set for your unit. So I was going to hop over to the demo now. everyone's still able to view the screen okay? All right. So right now we're logging into Robert's account. He's got 3 listings connected to Beyond Pricing today. And today I wanted to open into Cutler's Lodge. Oh, one moment. I'll just have to re-sign in. All right. So I've re-logged into Robert's account. And then we're going to click into one listing and just look at that market data, algo and base price, and specific to one listing to talk about that a little bit further. So market data, every property is going to have its own market data tab. And this is going to show you the occupancy data that we're using to help set your rates with. And then we do show you average prices on Airbnb and HomeAway for your bedroom size. But we're not copying off of these rates. We're just wanting to show you how your rates compare to the market. So the most important thing really is neighborhood occupancy, because occupancy data is what we use to predict demand. And what this graph is showing, depending on your date range, is the percentage of properties booked on this day. So we can see back in February 2019, this neighborhood was about 48% booked. So what do we mean by neighborhood? Neighborhood is a custom cluster of units around this property that we're using to base that neighborhood off of. So there's no set diameter of, hey, we go, half a mile or half a kilometer out into a radius. We have an internal revenue management team that goes in and hand builds those markets by pulling in listings from Airbnb, Booking.com, as well as VRBO. In our platform, right, our database, we've been analyzing every listing that exists on these channels since 2013, right? So we can go back 2 years ago, as well as the past year, and see what occupancy looked like. So what's the story here? Right, we talked about earlier in Cornwall, we saw occupancy kind of through the roof and way higher than last year, starting in July when those restrictions got lifted. And that's what you can see here in Robert's market as well, is that occupancy, right, in July was about 80%, where last year was 50%, or 2 years ago. And we can see that occupancy way, way higher than last year during that time. So historical occupancy is important, right? But you can imagine going into July, if we weren't looking at future occupancy, we wouldn't see the big difference here. We wouldn't see how much we're pacing this year versus last year. And I think that's one of the biggest values that we give to people, is we finally are able to show you, right, how is the market booking up? How are you booking up compared to that? And from that, you can really glean if you're underpriced or overpriced. It's easy to see if you're overpriced, you don't get booked. Whether you're underpriced and leaving 400 pounds or 1,000 pounds on the table during high season is hard to identify. So what our platform's doing is looking at historical performance and then also seeing how future occupancy is performing against that. So this blue line is looking at that same group of properties that we looked at in the past, and looking at future dates and seeing how they're booking up this year. And that future occupancy is really important. Years differ 1 year from the next. Like we saw looking in the past, we saw how much different high season in the fall looked this year versus last year. But events and holidays change dates. Events and holidays are more popular this year versus last year. Different changes like that. So we're using that forward-looking occupancy to basically check how are we performing versus last year, and should we be getting more aggressive or less aggressive on certain days. And when we see that a season is outperforming last year, we can automatically raise your prices because that's what our algo is doing. It's starting with that base price, which is the starting point for all of our price fluctuations. In this chart view, it's this blue dotted line. And the base price is It's not the lowest price or the highest price. It's kind of like the average price, and it's your main lever for the property. So we start with this base price, and then depending on how much demand there is for each day, historically and how we predict that to look in the future, that's how we're calculating these different rates in the chart. So this chart is showing you a bird's eye view of your pricing over the next year. Over here on the left is today's date. Over here on the right, you can see is May 2022. So you can see for Robert, we're pushing prices well farther than 12 months. So the algorithm, right, using that base price and market data to set these 365 different prices. Yep. Do you have a question, Alistair?
Nope.
Okay. So our right, the base price is using that market data, and our algorithm is using that to set the full next year pricing. And in our market data, we're showing you what percentage of days are booked, and that's really what drives the algorithm. And in the calendar, we're showing you, right, in the market data, you can see what the occupancy level is. In the calendar, we break that into 3 different buckets. There's seasonality fluctuations, day of week fluctuations, and then events and holidays. So each night we're kind of telling you that base price we're starting with, and then we're adding or subtracting due to seasonality, day of week, and then any other events and holidays, you would see that pop up there as well. Great. So I saw a question from Shirley. If the algo compares to the previous year, how will this work for 2021, given that we had months of lockdown, so immediately occupancy will be higher? So when we look at market data, and we can spot out where that data from last year kind of became rather unusable, right? We know that these aren't real bookings, that these are mostly blocks. So we have a team of revenue managers, to answer your question, Shirley. We have a team of revenue managers that maintains our markets, decides on their size and the different clusters inside of them, right? And they're able to take this occupancy data that we know is false during this time of April to July, and essentially replace it from data from 2 years ago, or go in and clean up the blocks that we're able to find. And as that data approaches, even if that data is a little wonky from last year, what we really want to focus on is future occupancy as that data approaches. So we know how the markets performed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, et cetera. So although our data last year might look a little funny, we have a ton of historical data and also the forward-looking data to help us decide on prices.
Are you ready to take the questions that have been coming in now, Jacob, or have you got more you want to present? What would you like to do?
Well, Stephen had a question about how can you help us get the right base price? And I'd like to answer that question because that was just really the next piece of the presentation. Right. Because that base price is right, it controls every single day's rate. So it is really important to get that right. So a few things about the base price. One is it's not set in stone, right? So once you do decide on your first base price, you don't need to keep it there for a month or 2 months. In fact, you should be logging in and checking that base price and making adjustments from time to time. So here in the chart view, we have a few metrics that we can pull in that help you set a great base price for your property. So Robert's currently using our pricing. So we can't compare our rates to rates he's currently pricing because they match perfectly. If you're not using our rates and you log into Beyond Pricing, you're going to see your pricing chart on this graph as well. And you'll see a base price that comes preloaded with the tool. So first thing is that base price that comes preloaded. It's kind of just based on your current rates, and it's really not to be trusted. It's just a kind of placeholder until someone comes and takes a look at where that base price should be. What I recommend doing is looking at your prior year max ADR, which will show you the highest price that you achieved in each of these months last year. So when we look at our current base price in blue line, for Robert, we can see we're shooting a little bit higher for Christmas and New Year's than we got last year. We're shooting higher for our half-term rates. And in general, right, we're just charging a little bit higher than our highest rates of last year, especially when we're looking far out, kind of right where we want to be. And then you can also look at monthly ADR. And ADR is average daily rate, so essentially the price per night for specific bookings. So the prior year monthly ADR is the average price that was charged in each month. So you can use these two graphs, pull those into the chart, and then you can make adjustments to this base price, and that's going to show up on the screen and be able to see kind of in a live fashion how our rates compare to the rates that you've gotten in the past, right? So be able to use this to set a base price where you'll see our blue lines in conjunction with yours. That's a good way to start is looking at these gray lines and lining up the prices, but also using the calendar view. It's going to show you these green boxes of these are confirmed bookings at prices that you've booked for this year, right? So just like we saw in the chart, you can make adjustments to the base price here, and it'll show changes to your prices throughout the calendar. So in the calendar, as you adjust this base price, you can change those so that some of these rates that we're pushing out are similar to the rates that bookings you've already gotten, right? And the goal is to increase revenue. So we want to see bookings different than what maybe higher than ones that have been placed in the past. But this base price is just a starting point. We want to kind of align our prices with what you're doing now, hit the go button, and then see how things perform and decide if we should be increasing that base price or decreasing that base price. So the base price isn't set in stone, but it is the starting point for all of our price fluctuations. The minimum price, which I'll bring in here, is just the floor that we'll never go below on a daily rate in order to get a booking. So this would be the price per night on like a weekly stay in your low season. We need flexibility on the minimum price because if you set your minimum price to a high rate for maybe like a short break ADR, then we can't go lower than that on our weekly bookings or longer stays. So that minimum price should be pretty fair and really at that lowest rate that you'd want to accept, giving us that guardrail of never going below that price. The third setting that isn't found in Beyond Pricing, but is actually found in Super Control, is Super Control's minimum price setting. And that's kind of one of the benefits of the length of stay strategy that we can somewhat offer in conjunction with Beyond Pricing. And what that minimum price is more of a minimum booking value. So let's say for this Cutler's Lodge, right, our minimum price is £90, but the lowest Robert wants to take for a booking is £250. Robert's able to allow 1 night, 2 night, and 3 night bookings in a Super Control account. And as long as that minimum price in Super Control is set to £250, we'll never suggest or be able to offer any booking values below that, whether it's a 1 night stay, 2 night stay, or 3 night stay. So those shorter breaks at really, really high rates, they come unexpectedly and they're not a huge part of our revenue, but with that minimum price in Super Control, you can kind of let us be flexible with those rates, being comfortable knowing you're not going to take an unprofitable booking. So the base price, minimum price, those are your key settings. The base price is your main lever. I wanted to show this slide kind of like as like a cheat sheet. If you plan on giving us a try and creating an account with us after the presentation and you want to go live, these are kind of the 3 main settings you want to look at and the key things to know about them. So I'm not sure if you're able to take a screenshot, but this is kind of a cheat sheet for you to get started in a comfortable way. Next, we'll go through what overrides and functionality you have for really setting your own rates within Beyond Pricing. So each listing in addition to that chart and market data view that we saw, also has a calendar view where you can look at these blue squares are days that aren't booked yet, and these green squares are days that you've already taken a booking. So if you want to override our rates, you can click on a single day or highlight an entire month, and then you can increase your price by 10%, decrease your prices by 10%, or set prices to a specific pound value. So that's to be used anytime you feel like you need to take control, or maybe you need to set prices for a monthly booking and you just want to set those lower rates. Anytime you want to come in and take control, you have the option to do that in the calendar view. In addition, in the Customize tab, where we saw the minimum price for the entire year, you can also set those minimum prices per season so that you don't need to worry about taking a low season rate during high season or anything like that. So just added guardrails here to make sure that you guys are taking the bookings that you want. And then we have the flexibility to set the best rates we can for those.
Okay. Can we add some questions in at this point, Jacob?
Absolutely.
We've got a fair few, quite a few coming in about large properties, a long way ahead. How much data would you be able to gather in order to make that kind of comparable? So, you know, obviously a Sleep 6 in a hotspot area has a lot of property data, whereas a Sleep 30 in a rural area, how does that work? I mean, lots of questions on what's the neighborhood, what's the area that you would pull in for that? How would that work?
Yeah, so the neighborhood is a cluster of units around it that are in close vicinity. And what we're really trying to glean from this data is like, are people traveling or are they not? Right, if you have a 30 bedroom home out in a rural area, right, you're right, there probably aren't a ton of properties around you that are exactly like yours. But if we're looking at 250 units ranging in different bedroom sizes, and all of those properties start getting booked for a specific day, then that is relevant data for your property, right? And we want to know what's happening in the market and if we have the opportunity to raise prices or not. So this, neighborhood or cluster, we're not looking for exact, like perfect replicas of your unit. That'd be pretty impossible in a market like the rural UK and the self-caterers with how unique different cottages are in different locations, but more of just, are people traveling and are they not? And some of those insights are really granular, like, hey, the third week in August carries more demand than the second week. And we can charge 10% higher rates, right? Sometimes that analysis from the cluster is really granular, and sometimes it's, hey, occupancy is 30% higher last year and we should be charging way higher rates. And for Robert, if you go over to the stats tool, this shows you all of your booking data, and we can see last year versus 2 years ago, right? So in August of this year, our average daily rate was 178 pounds, where last year's average daily rate was 103 pounds. So everyone kind of saw an increase in revenue this past fall because occupancy was way higher. But then Robert saw an even bigger increase in revenue, right? Because we were charging 70% higher rates than we were last year. And that's where the big value can come from.
Okay, so a lot of questions sort of link into that from another angle, which is we've got people on the webinar who are new to self-catering, so they've got no historical data,
Yep.
or closed for a lot of last year for one reason or another. So there's a lot of people asking, what if you're new? Where does this data? I'm still a bit mystified, if I'm honest. Where does this data? Where do you draw it from? That can give the people listening a bit of clarity.
Yeah. So the stats and market data, right? Stats is pulling data from this property in historical bookings. So if you're brand new to self-catering and you haven't taken a booking, you're not going to see any data here. But remember, stats and your internal booking data isn't what the algorithm is using to automatically set rates, right? That's found in the market data tab. And this is data from our revenue management team. They have, this is a complicated graph. They have way bigger graphs with way more data sets and points, and they're pulling in specific listings from Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, right? Publicly available listings. And then they can look historically to see how many of those were booked or not, and how many of those are booked into the future. So you not having any data, it'll make setting your base price maybe a little bit trickier because you don't have really any bookings to really base it off of, but it's not going to affect our ability to set the best rates for you or understand the fluctuations in your market.
Okay, some quick fire questions at you. If I go and look at one of the people on here who signs up to be on pricing for a cottage tomorrow, and it says 800 quid, if I go back a couple of days later, could it say 1,000 quid like it does when you book an airline ticket?
Yeah, it certainly could. And especially if they're not using Beyond Pricing today, they turn it on tomorrow, then probably a lot of their rates will look a lot higher for specific events and holidays. So it's certainly possible, but a big difference also is, our rates aren't fluctuating so dramatically on a daily basis, like when you're booking an airline where, one day the price is 70 quid, the next day it's 300. Those type of price fluctuations aren't happening in Beyond Pricing unless, Beyonce announces a concert in your neighborhood and bookings are through the roof. Like then you'll probably see a huge change like that. Or if there was an announcement to restrictions, right, and everyone started booking like crazy, like we saw in the fall, then we might see prices start to increase quite a bit. But rarely would we see that happen, and only in kind of really intense shifts in demand, like pandemics or a big concert like that.
Okay, so several people on here are on Super Control and also on Airbnb. If they put Beyond Pricing onto Super Control, will that reflect through to the prices on Airbnb?
Yep. So if Super Control channel manager is pushing your rates and min stays and communicating with Airbnb about availability, when we push our rates into Super Control, they exist in that system the same place that your rates exist today. So those rates then feed out to Airbnb the same way it happens today. If you're using Airbnb and Super Control separately, we have the ability to push rates directly to Airbnb, but we don't have the ability to push availability back into Super Control. So you'd have to either sign up for Super Control's channel manager or manage that availability manually.
Okay. Going back again once more to booking away ahead, there's lots of questions on that. A lot of people on here might have wedding venues or have really peak times in the summer going maybe 2-3 years out. You said you could extend it. I mean, how far can you extend it on Beyond Pricing?
I don't know what the technical limit would be. I think the farthest I've seen is, about 2.5 years, maybe 3. There might be people doing that. And the reason it's, we are using data to set our prices, and there's no data for vacation rentals 3 months from now, or 3 years from now, sorry. So, when using historical data, right, to use that to price the next year is one thing, but using it to price 3 years from now is another. So when we see, right, people opening their rates up to 2-3 years, their pricing charts generally look the same as the year before. We will be adjusting for Easter and all these events and holidays that are changing dates. But for the most part, we'll just be inflating our rates. So we have last minute discounts that automatically bring prices down as the date approaches, but also as we get 270 or 390 days or more away, we'll be increasing those prices 10 or 30%. So that if we do take a booking, it is at a much higher rate.
Questions come in which I hadn't seen before, which is when you're doing your neighborhoods and your clusters, this is self-catering data, or is this B&Bs and hotels? How specific is it to the vacation rental sector?
Yeah, so we're only going to be looking at vacation rentals that exist on Airbnb, VRBO, or Booking.com. So we're able to pick out specific listings and only look at those vacation rentals.
Right. Okay. I'm just Sure.
So could I just add a little bit to that, because there are a few questions on, and adding my own experience to this, where many people on the call are in very rural locations and they're concerned that there isn't enough data, there aren't enough similar properties in the location. We're also in the property you're looking at here, very rural location in southwest Scotland. And yes, there are a number of holiday homes in the area, but when we first set up, that was a concern of ours, and completely no longer a concern. The fact that it is looking at so many data points, I think people are getting a bit obsessed about the fact that it's just looking at a few properties in the local area. It's doing an awful lot of stuff behind the scenes, which helps identify that supply and demand, and therefore adjust your base pricing to match the market. Very effective. Don't worry about the fact that you're in a relatively rural area or your property is quite unique or large. It will work.
Okay, a question just popped in at the last minute here, which is how do the rates that you set take into account VAT? Because some properties are charging 20% VAT and some properties are not. Is it just the top line price, and that those of us that are on VAT have to do what we normally do? And I think the technical term is suck it up. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I would say, like, think of VAT almost like a channel markup, where this is what's happening, right? You're entering a rental amount in a super control, and then VAT is doing something different with those rates after the fact, just like a markup. So within Beyond Pricing, we'll kind of view things in a non-VAT collecting world, right? So then we're pushing prices without VAT. And then since your historical data and what we're looking at, also doesn't have that VAT included, right? The data we're pushing in just has that VAT kind of added on top, if I understand the question correctly.
Okay.
I would say that would be an odd way to do it, because anyone who was VAT registered would then have their prices adjusted upwards by 20% relative to someone who wasn't. I can't charge a 20% premium to an identical cottage down the road just because I'm VAT registered and they're not. So that seems a bit odd.
Well, we're setting rates specific to supply and demand. So the prices you see in the calendar would be the prices that we're pushing into super control. So when there was a question on VAT, right? Whatever VAT, how that is affecting your booking process, if it at all today, right? That's not going to change with our rates.
No, so you put your
we're not
base price. It has to incorporate VAT if you're VAT registered. Your minimum price has to incorporate VAT, and then the price comparables will be just doing what the price comparables are. And if we have VAT, we just have to deal with that. That seems to be the answer there. Okay.
Well, remember that we're only looking at, when we're looking at competition in the data set, we're just looking at, hey, are these people booked or are they not?
Yeah.
We're not looking at their prices and using those to come up with our rates, right? These aren't like magical numbers where, hey, this is that like magic number that's going to pop up perfectly on the OTA and catch someone's attention. It's more of, hey, what are we predicting based on demand is the highest rate you can charge here and still get a booking.
Okay, a critical question coming up.
But I think the thing to make clear, is that most people currently wouldn't put into Super Control or any other booking engine an ex VAT price. It would be a fully inclusive of VAT price. So
it's covered. It's covered. It deals with that.
Can I just add very briefly to that one? If you do have extras like a booking fee, which many agencies on the call will have, then that would be added on and you use Super Control on top of the Beyond Pricing prices. So it's automatically always adjusting to try and get the optimal price, but it doesn't need to include all of your extras.
Right. Price of Beyond Pricing, how much does it cost? Is there a trial period? Can we look at it? Can we try it before we buy it?
Yeah, so you're able to go to Beyond Pricing and create an account with us. Once you create an account with Beyond Pricing, you'll be asked to connect your PMS or direct to your channels. And then once you connect everything, you'll have free access to our dashboard forever. So you can preview a year of pricing before you turn it on, or you can just use our stats and market data to kind of power your own pricing strategy, or just, you know, get used to the platform a little bit. So you have free access to the tool forever. Once you hit price syncing on, that's kind of when you become a paying customer, but you do have a 30-day free trial. So think of us as your data warehouse for internal data, market dynamics, right? All of that stuff is free, and then you would pay 1% if you decide to turn on pricing.
Okay, and the price, the cost of Beyond Pricing?
We charge 1% of booking revenue.
Right.
So that's rental amount plus fees, excluding taxes.
Brilliant. That's clear. Now, if I've got 72 properties here at my cottage, I don't, but if I had on my complex, will I need to put all 72 on, or could I just put my Sleeps 8 on, for example? Do you have to put all properties on, or do you that you have on Super Control or any other platform, or can you choose it by property?
Yeah, great question. So when you create your account with Beyond Pricing, we would recommend connecting all of your units so that when you log in and check the tool out, you can look at all of your different units and use our Insights tool, which helps you analyze your portfolio's performance. And then each property individually has its own price syncing button. So you can choose which properties we are pushing pricing for and which ones aren't. But the ones that you connect to Beyond Pricing for data purposes is different to what properties you actually use our price syncing for.
But in essence, if I wanted to put 21 of my 72 on, I would be paying for 21 of my 72, not all 72. I think that was the question.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. A question about whether the 1% is plus VAT. I understand from you the other day when we spoke that the 1% is not plus VAT. It's just 1%. Is that correct?
So we do not charge on taxes, and we view everything here in like the rental amount plus your fees. So when you get a booking for like £500, if at the time of booking it collects some VAT, we're not going to charge on that VAT.
I'm just trying to make sure. There's some questions here about have come through before about does it link with free to book? We've had that question a couple of times. Do you know free to book, Jacob?
Oh, I'm familiar with the company, but we don't have an integration with them today.
Doesn't link with that, but you did mention earlier that there are some other PMSs that you do link to, so that will probably be on your website, will it?
Yeah, so it's on our website. Also, when you create an account with us, you click link another account, and it's going to show you a whole host of systems that we integrate with. So if you're on Super Control, you'll just have to come in here and enter your client key. There's instructions and help docs on Beyond Pricing's website that help you connect your account and help you get everything set up. So that's where you would link your Super Control account. You can see some other PMS partners in our direct channel integrations with Airbnb and Booking.com as well. Okay,
another question that's coming up. A lot of people on this call will do what we call 347 in the UK, which will be a 3-night weekend, 4-night midweek, 7-night week. Can you set the parameters up in Beyond Pricing so that those are still the three prices that are offered from through the Beyond Pricing, so that they don't end up selling single night prices, 2-night prices? A lot of people don't want to take single nights and 2 nights, so we're moving here to a nightly pricing, but they will still want to be on a 3 times nightly pricing or a 4 times nightly pricing. So can you limit it to those offers that you can still only take bookings for 3, 4, and 7?
Yeah, so when you turn on Beyond Pricing, none of your current minimum stay rules or check-in rules, changeover rules, etc., all that stuff still works the same. So if you only allow 3-night bookings on the weekend, and it's those specific kind of check-ins, then that'll work the same with Beyond Pricing.
Right. Okay. And I'm thinking that we're getting close to having got through most of the questions. Again, there's still a lot of people having some doubts about their property is so very specialist. It's fully accessible. It can take wheelchairs. It's got a hot tub. It's got a swimming pool for dogs. Okay, it's got a gymnasium for your pet kangaroo, and they want to make sure that that isn't going to get underpriced through being compared to non-comparable properties. So this really USP heavy property, Jacob, how is that protected within a beyond pricing algorithm?
Yeah, great question. So I would look at it this way. So if I open up the chart view for Robert's property, we have this base price of 155, and you can see how our prices are fluctuating throughout the year at that given base price, right? So let's say Robert has another unit, right next to Cutler's Lodge that has, 3 more bedrooms, way nicer furniture. It's got a hot tub, right? ADA accessible, all the things you just mentioned, right? It's still going to have the same market data and cluster, right? Because it's in the same area, and regardless of the quality of the property, right? We all experience the same high season. We can all charge higher rates for Christmas and New Year's and bank holidays. But that property that's larger or has more amenities and just in general has always achieved higher rates than this one, right? Maybe that base price is 200 pounds, right? So if you compare those two pricing charts, the nicer property has the same fluctuations, right? Because it has the same holidays and events and seasonality. But if you have a higher base price, you're always going to be more expensive than the properties with a lower base price. So again, right, that if that 4-bedroom home is really unique and really special, it's probably just going to carry a much higher base price than other 4 bedrooms would in the area because of that.
Okay, now we are due to finish, aren't we, Robert? Is it a 3 o'clock finish?
I can't remember, I'll be honest with you, Alistair, but I think we have got through a lot of the questions. So
yeah, we've got 160 still on, so I'm happy to stick around and answer questions.
I think just to follow that point very briefly, and it is a common misconception that I find myself answering, and just to reiterate that what Jake's just said here, is that you are in control of your pricing. You know your property. You know it's more valuable than the one down the road or even the one 100 miles away. So you control that base pricing. Beyond pricing bases everything off that. And it's a really important thing. And this misconception is that beyond pricing is setting your prices. It is modifying up and down based on a price that you are in control of.
Okay, some questions coming in at the end again. People worried about pricing going up a lot. That seems to be a concern that people have. There'll be 2 reasons for that. Jacob, we've got regular customers. So if I've got regular customers and I put my price up too much, what kind of strategy would you have for dealing with that? I mean, obviously you want to try and optimize your price, but you want to retain your regulars. What would you do there?
Yeah, so I would, allow our rates to be advertised everywhere without any type of restrictions. And then with the returning guests, my strategy would be to offer them a 10% discount, and just let them know, like, hey, we can't offer you the same rates as last year, right? There's a global pandemic. There's a lot of things changing in our industry. So we have a new pricing strategy, but of course, as a returning guest, we'll always give you 10% off, right? So then, you're giving this returning guest 10% off, but if it is a really high rate, you're probably still charging 20, 30% more than you did last year. And then you kind of get that guest in that notion of, okay, they have a 10% discount, so it's value to them, but they don't just get to be getting the rate they got last year.
Okay.
And I can confirm that is exactly the strategy we've employed with a few guests, but actually it's been amazing how many guests they're willing to book. They're returning guests. They want to book and come back to our properties year on year on year, and they should be willing to pay the market rate for that. But you can use vouchers and other discounts in SuperControl if you're a SuperControl user to override those prices if you want to.
Question back on pricing, I'm afraid, Jacob. You said 1% plus fees, so I'm inevitably getting lots of questions on what fees are.
So what I mentioned was we charge on rental amount plus fees, excluding taxes, right? That's the amount that we're charging 1% on. So, if you lump in £150 cleaning fee with your rental amount and send that to your website, right, we charge on that total booking revenue for that booking.
Okay, I'm trying to answer as we go along. What do we got here? I've got one here about somebody, when people do property discounts for lower occupancy, Jacob, what happens there? So you have a Sleep 6 cottage, which you discount normally within Super Control for a Sleeps 4. There would just both prices be adjusted accordingly?
So we would push one set of pricing into Super Control. And Robert may know, I believe will be like the max occupancy price. And then, right, if Super Control has the ability to adjust rates from there based on occupancy, that's kind of what they would be able to do in their system.
So you can still use the low occupancy discount in Super Control if that is a important part of your marketing strategy. That said, I have also seen some people who have moved to dynamic pricing, having previously thought that their low occupancy discount was absolutely critical, and then after a short period abandoned that because they're now getting bookings at the right rate for the property. So it's been interesting seeing that. But you can still use low occupancy discounts and other discounts in Super Control, although low occupancy is really the key one that you would want to continue to use.
Jacob, is there a minimum contract term?
So it depends on like what type of business you are. So if you are a larger property manager and we are or larger agency and we're devoting onboarding resources, right, in account manager, and right, it's a really kind of month-to-month process of onboarding a new portfolio. Then we'll have some, we have both month-to-month and annual options for contract terms for agencies. If you're, a smaller business, 1 or 2 units, then you'll be, signing up and be able to get started without any type of agreement. And anyone, right, can go to Beyond Pricing, create an account, and turn things on completely by themselves, right? You don't have to talk to anybody. But with those larger portfolios, typically people want some structure there and to talk about how everything's going to work.
Okay.
There was a question there which I just partially answered in typed answer about getting your base price right at the start. And I think this follows on from partly some of the stuff that Jake answered in one of the slides. If you move to Beyond Pricing, then you can expect a few things to change a little bit. One of them might be you won't get any bookings for a period, because if you have been priced too low, you might have booked well ahead. And this is exactly our experience when we moved to Beyond Pricing. So you might set a base price, you might see prices which you think are a bit too high, but you've got to give it a bit of time to make sure that it is working for you. And if you don't get any bookings for a few weeks, don't suddenly get scared and blame Beyond Pricing for your prices being too high. It will push those bookings into a window where you're going to get optimum price. So that said, you might also want to tweak your base price over the first couple of months just to make sure you're getting the right level.
Okay. Last minute stuff, Jacob. Suddenly, last minute. You mentioned earlier, I picked up that you would be discounting towards the last minute. So now we're a week out, and we've got all our apartments are available. But we know that weekend there's the Beyonce concert that you mentioned earlier is taking place. So there's demand, but you just haven't nailed it. Instinctively we want to keep the price high or even higher in a situation like that, but we're not getting traffic. How does Beyond Pricing? Do we have to manually override at that point? We would know that this event was happening, otherwise we wouldn't have this piece of data, obviously.
Right. Yeah, so if it's an event that you know about, right, you'll see that kind of spike in your pricing chart. And those spikes are just times of year where you always want to pay a little bit more attention to pricing, just because those are big opportunities to get your highest rates. And we saw in the customized tab, we have these automated last minute discounts. what Robert has set up here is pretty conservative, right? We're not decreasing our rates until we get within 7 days, and we're bringing them down kind of 10%. And then if it's not booked and someone wants to check in within the next 3 days, then there's a 25% discount on those daily rates. So we have these last minute discounts that are automated. So at some point, right, these will either kick in and start bringing those rates down. But if it's a really important time, right, for a specific event, then we'll probably want to treat that a little bit differently, right? I would normally let my last minute discounts kind of handle filling the gaps on these normal weeks and weekends and days. But then as, right, a big event starts to come around the corner, right, when I would do my review, right, each week you should be logging into Beyond Pricing, take a look at your calendar for the next 3 months and see if you should make an adjustments, right? Then you would see that big event for that Beyonce concert, and as that date kind of approaches, you'd be able to see, right, what rates are you not getting booked at now, and as the date approach, I think you would want to start bringing those prices down. Not as far as a normal day, but with like our goods expiring, right? Once the check-in day passes, we can't get that revenue back. So I would suggest lowering rates just to make sure that those events get booked, right? An event going unbooked is a lot of missed revenue. You know, a gap that shows up during the week, you know, it happens and isn't a huge missed opportunity. And that's just my personal, what would be my strategy there.
Okay, I got one, Robert, that came in a bit earlier that said, since you're the customer on here, as well as the platform, so you're in that place. Beth and I are learning about it today properly for the first time ourselves. So it says, what's it done for your business? What's Beyond Pricing done for your business at Oraland?
So yes, I am the customer here, and the reason why I'm so enthusiastic about this is because of what it's done to our business at Oraland. So we switched on Beyond Pricing about a year ago, a bit before maybe the end of October last year. We thought we were priced quite well. Actually, turned out that maybe we weren't as good at pricing as we thought we were. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone on this call is bad at pricing. It means that we had got a few things wrong. It took a few weeks for us to really get to grips with things. As I said earlier, we didn't get any bookings suddenly, and where we would be expecting them. But as time went on, we started to get bookings in January and February. Actually, our previous pricing was too high, and we took a number of bookings, which now with particular we're grateful for, because obviously the lockdown then came, that we hadn't been getting previously. Most of our bookings were priced more than our previous pricing had been, and despite the fact that our business has been closed for all of those weeks and months, we are roughly tracking around about the 2019 revenue levels for our smaller properties. The large property has obviously been a different year for large properties, as many of you on the call will know, but it's been transformative to our business, really transformative.
So I guess one of the key questions coming out of this is, how long do you really think it gets before someone coming on, like myself or Beth or any of the people on the webinar, get to be able to have the confidence they've got that base price? It seems to me the base price is really the nub of this. If you can get that base price right, so how long does that really take before you think you'd be comfortable with that? And is there any help in setting up that base price as you come on to become a Beyond Pricing customer?
And also, how long does it take for you to realise it's either too high or too low?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is help in setting your base price. There's a lot of articles in our help docs, and you can always reach out to our support team or your account manager or anyone in sales as well. I'm super easy to get a hold of, and love hopping on the phone and jumping into people's accounts and helping them set things up. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. I think in order for you to tell if your base price is too high or too low, you need to pass through, right, some time where you should be getting bookings, right? So if we pop open a calendar and the next 3 months are completely booked already, right? There's not a day that could possibly get booked until March of next year, then we probably won't see any bookings for maybe even an entire month. Maybe shorter, right? The first few weeks of January, we typically see a big boost in bookings. But it's kind of how long it takes is, right? How long does it take for us to get into a window where we should be seeing bookings? And that's where this health score comes into play, right? Where we're comparing your occupancy versus the market. And when you first log in and start using Beyond Pricing, the health score won't mean quite as much because your current occupancy isn't based on our rates. But essentially the health score looks at your occupancy versus the market and compares it, right? If you're booking up way faster than the market at our given first base price, we need to increase that, right? Because you're the best deal, you're the first home that it's everyone's choosing, because it's a great home at a good value. But we don't want to wait last minute for all of our bookings, right? So we use that health score over time to figure out, hey, is this base price too high or too low? The nice thing is, right, most days are not booked most of the time, right? Most days, right, availability on the calendar doesn't get booked, right? So we don't need to worry about months, 3 through 12 really. We want to focus on the next 2 to 3 months and really worry about getting the bookings that still need to be made, and over time seeing how that base price performs.
Okay, right. I have to say I don't understand this question, but I'm going to ask it of you anyway, Jacob. So if you don't understand it either, that's fine. It's, can we use Beyond Pricing without syncing prices?
Yep. So when you connect to Beyond Pricing,
Yeah.
So when you create an account with us, you'll be asked to link an account. So you'll need to connect some account that we're able to integrate with, like Super Control. And then you get free access to all of this for free. Some things we haven't really dug into today would be our Insights tool, which is super helpful, especially for larger agencies that are managing like a large number of listings, because you're able to see how your kind of portfolio is comparing year over year on revenue numbers, occupancy, right, average daily rates, right, and this would all be completely free to you, even if you decided never to sync and actually use our rates.
Right.
So all of this stuff is free and especially helpful for larger managers to dig into certain performance metrics.
Okay, I've got one that's just come in, which I think I know the answer to, because when we had a chat about putting this webinar together, Robert did answer it then. But what's the difference between Beyond Pricing and Airbnb's Smart Pricing, which is currently free? What's the difference? Robert,
Yep.
Do you want to go?
So I'm sure Jake would know in more detail, but my experience of the Airbnb Smart Pricing is that it just drives your prices down to favor higher occupancy. There's no comparison really. Beyond Pricing is a real, it's part of your revenue management strategy, but dynamic pricing is a big part of that, and it's a totally different tool to the Airbnb thing.
Okay. I've got one here coming in. Are the same data points being used for, I think you've said repeatedly that it's not because you create the clusters and stuff, but are the same data points being used for every property, Jacob? So if you had two lots of people are different, 8 people or 14 people looking for the same property, I mean, it would still come up with the price, wouldn't it? I mean, it's just searching out all the same. That's the cluster covers that, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we're using, right, the base price and the supply and demand data to set our prices, and then things like pricing based on the occupancy, booking extras, things like that. That's added on after the fact.
Right. So if you've got 2 properties, I've got a sleep 6 and I've got a sleep 20, you would be making different assumptions and gathering from different places, wouldn't you? The fact that it's my property is almost irrelevant because you're trying to find the property for a price of that size in that cluster in that space.
Yeah, so your property, right, would be would be in your comp set, right? We don't immediately start changing prices based on bookings you're taking, but as your property gets booked, it's part of that cluster that we're looking at to see how the market's behaving as a whole.
Okay. Right, trying to get back to everybody. Right, okay. This is the virtual cottage question, Robert. So yes, this is I have this. So if I use my model, I have 2 sleep 6s and sleep 20. I would like to continue to be able to do my 20, my 26, my 32, and my individual 6s. So although I've only got 3 properties on site, I have 6 properties on super control. So we've got someone who's come on with 4 lodges. So they get people wanting to book all 4 of those lodges simultaneously, and they've created a virtual, I would gather from the question in
Yep.
super control, that they've got 4 cottages, 4 lodges. So virtual cottage, Robert, probably
So
you.
I'll take this one because it is complicated to a certain extent. So there are 2 parts of this. If you price your virtual property differently to the individual units, so you deem that your Sleeps 20 version is more valuable than the individual units, then Beyond Pricing is perfect for that. If you just simply creating virtual properties to make it easier to book those groups, so they don't have to book 4 properties, they can understand that they can book a property for 30 people, even though it's comprised of 4 different units. That is a little bit more complicated, and it's something which we can probably do some work on. Most people that have virtual properties are selling them at a different price, but I'm aware that some will just simply use it that the booking the 3 properties as one is simply the same price as the 3 added up, and that's a bit more complicated because Beyond Pricing would set slightly different pricing. There's some more detailed conversations to have on that one, both on our side and between us and Beyond Pricing.
Okay, right. Well, we're coming up to 15:29. So we had an earlier debate about whether this webinar was going to be 1 hour or 1 hour and a half. We certainly never do them for longer than an hour and a half. We've got other things to do. 130 of you have stayed on. So thank you very much indeed. I hope you found that valuable and you know and understand a bit more about dynamic pricing. Please do feel free to send your questions in to whoever you think on the panel will be best suited to answer them. I would like to, as always, thank the PASC Gold sponsors who are Super Control and Premier Cottages. We wouldn't be able to pull these things together without their help as well. I would very much like to thank Jacob for being under the spotlight for so long and answering everybody's questions in an open way. And as I said, if any of you got any further questions, please do send them in to the relevant connection. We will, but this is recorded. We do put this up on YouTube. So if you want to refer back to elements of it, we will be putting out the link on the PASC Facebook page just as soon as we have it, so that anybody who wants to look at it again can see it there. But for now, I'm going to say once again, thank you all very, very much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and take care out there. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.